Millionaire visits Children's Hospital. Poor twins hand him a letter from the mother he lost. The grey November sky hung heavy over downtown Chicago as Marcus Wellington's black Mercedes pulled up to the weathered facade of St. Mary's Children's Hospital. The contrast was stark. His pristine luxury car against the chipped paint and cracked sidewalk of the struggling medical facility. Marcus adjusted his expensive Italian tie and checked his Rolex. Another charity obligation, another tax write-off. At 45, Marcus had built his real estate empire from nothing, transforming abandoned lots into gleaming skyscrapers. Success had come at a cost. 3 failed marriages, estranged children, and a heart that had grown as cold as the Chicago wind. Today's visit was purely business, orchestrated by his publicist to soften his ruthless public image. The hospital's lobby was a study in quiet desperation. Faded murals of cartoon characters peeled from walls that hadn't seen fresh paint in years. The fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting an unsteady glow over worn linoleum floors. The smell of disinfectant couldn't quite mask the underlying odor of institutional neglect. Dr. Sarah Chen, the hospital administrator, greeted him with a tired but genuine smile. Her white coat was wrinkled, and dark circles under her eyes spoke of endless double shifts. "Mr. Wellington, thank you so much for coming. Your donation will make such a difference for these children." Marcus nodded curtly, his mind already calculating how quickly he could complete this photo opportunity and return to his downtown office. As they walked through the corridors, he noticed the details that money couldn't hide. The ancient wheelchairs, held together with duct tape, the outdated medical equipment, the staff moving with the weary efficiency of people stretched too thin. In the pediatric ward, children in various stages of treatment looked up with curious eyes. Some were bald from chemotherapy, others connected to IV lines, all bearing the weight of illnesses no child should face. Their parents sat beside hospital beds, some sleeping in uncomfortable chairs they'd occupied for days. "We serve primarily low-income families," Dr. Chen explained as they toured the facility. "Many of our patients' parents work multiple jobs just to afford basic care. Your contribution will help us upgrade our equipment and extend our hours." Marcus found himself genuinely listening for the first time in months. As they entered the children's recreation room, a modest space with donated toys and books, he noticed 2 children sitting apart from the others. Emma and Ethan Parker, 8-year-old twins, sat quietly in the corner. Their clothes were clean, but clearly second-hand. Emma's purple sweater had been carefully mended at the elbow, and Ethan's jeans were a size too big, held up with a worn belt. Their sandy brown hair needed cutting, and their shoes showed signs of long wear. But their eyes, bright blue and intelligent, held something that made Marcus pause. The twins watched him with the careful attention children develop when they've learned early that adults' moods can change everything. They whispered to each other, occasionally glancing in his direction with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "Those are the Parker twins," Dr. Chen said softly. "Their mother, Linda, brought them here every week for Emma's treatments. Leukemia, Linda worked 3 jobs to pay for what insurance wouldn't cover." "Worked?" Marcus asked, noting the past tense. Dr. Chen's expression grew somber. "She passed away 2 weeks ago. Exhaustion," the doctors said, though I think it was a broken heart. She'd been caring for Emma alone since her husband left when the medical bills started piling up. The children are with their elderly grandmother now, but... She trailed off, the implications clear. Marcus felt an unexpected tightness in his chest. He watched as Emma, despite her obvious fatigue from treatment, gently braided her brother's hair while he read to her from a picture book. Their quiet tenderness toward each other spoke of children who'd grown up too fast, who'd learned to find comfort in each other when the adult world failed them. As Marcus and Dr. Chen prepared to leave the room, something extraordinary happened. Emma stood up, took her brother's hand, and they approached him together. Their steps were hesitant, but their resolve was clear. "Excuse me, mister," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you the man who helps people?" Marcus knelt down to their level, something he hadn't done in years. Up close, he could see the toll illness had taken on Emma, the pallor of her skin, the brittleness of her hair, but also the fierce light in her eyes that reminded him of someone he'd tried to forget. "I try to help," he said simply. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn envelope, sealed with tape that had yellowed with age. The paper was cheap, the kind you'd find at a corner store, and it was addressed in careful feminine handwriting. "Our mama asked us to give this to someone important if anything happened to her," Ethan said, his voice steady despite his tears. "She said it was very important and that we'd know the right person when we saw them." Emma nodded solemnly. "She said the right person would have kind eyes but a sad face, like someone who forgot how to be happy." Marcus felt the world shift beneath him as he took the envelope. His name was written across the front in handwriting he recognized with a shock that left him breathless. For Marcus Wellington. If you're reading this, then it's time you knew the truth. Linda Parker. The envelope trembled in his hands. Linda Parker, Linda Matthews, the woman he'd loved and lost 25 years ago, the woman who disappeared from his life when he'd been too proud and too young to fight for her. Where did your mother get this?" Marcus asked, his voice hoarse. "She always carried it," Emma said. "Even when we had to move and leave most of our stuff behind, she never left that letter. She said it was for someday." Marcus's mind raced. 25 years ago, he'd been a struggling construction worker, deeply in love with Linda Matthews, a waitress putting herself through nursing school. They talked about marriage, about children, about building a life together. But when his business started taking off and she began talking about the future with more certainty than he felt ready for, he'd panicked. Pride and fear had driven him to end things, telling himself he was too focused on success to be tied down. She tried to contact him afterward, but by then he was consumed with building his empire, changing phone numbers, moving offices, becoming unreachable. He'd convinced himself it was for the best, that they wanted different things. Now, holding this letter, he realized how wrong he'd been. Dr. Chen watched the emotional exchange with growing understanding. "Mr. Wellington, are you all right?" Marcus couldn't answer. He was staring at the envelope, remembering Linda's laugh, the way she'd believed in his dreams, even when he didn't believe in them himself, the way she'd looked at him like he was capable of being the man she saw in him. Can I read this privately?" he managed to ask. The twins nodded solemnly, and Dr. Chen led them to her office, closing the door behind them. Marcus sat in the worn chair across from her desk, his hands shaking as he carefully opened the envelope that had been waiting 25 years to find him. The letter was dated just 3 months ago, written in the same careful handwriting he remembered from grocery lists and love notes. "My dearest Marcus, if you're reading this, then my time has run out, and somehow this letter has found its way to you. I've carried it with me for so many years, never knowing if I'd have the courage to send it or if you'd even want to hear from me. I need you to know that I never stopped loving you, even after you walked away. I understood why you left. We were both so young, and you had such big dreams. I always believed you'd achieve everything you set out to do, but there's something I should have told you before you left, something I've carried alone all these years. When you ended things between us, I was pregnant. I was scared and hurt, and by the time I worked up the courage to tell you, you'd already moved on, changed your number, started your new life. I tried to find you, but you were already becoming someone unreachable. I want you to know that I never regretted raising them alone, never regretted loving you, never regretted the choice to keep them. but they deserved to know they had a father who might have loved them if he'd known they existed. Their names are Emma and Ethan. They're 8 years old now, and Marcus, they're the most beautiful children. Emma has your stubborn determination. When she was diagnosed with leukemia, she faced it with a courage that broke my heart. Ethan has your gentle soul underneath all that strength. He reads to her when she's scared, builds blankets forts when she's too sick to play outside. I'm not writing to ask for anything. I made my choices and I've lived with them. But if something happens to me, if these words somehow reach you, I want you to know they exist. Not because you owe them anything, but because they're part of you. And you might want to know that the best parts of who you are live on in them. I'm proud of what you've accomplished. I always knew you would change the world. But Marcus, I hope you've also learned to let the world change you. Success means nothing if you have no one to share it with. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and they're probably scared and alone. I'm not asking you to be their father. That's a role you have to choose. But maybe if you have room in your life, you could be their friend. They need someone to believe in them the way I always believed in you. All my love, always, Linda P.S. They don't know about you. I thought that decision should be yours to make. Marcus read the letter 3 times before the words fully sank in. Emma and Ethan weren't just random children he'd met at a charity event. They were his children, his and Linda's. The family he'd never known he'd lost, sitting in a hospital room 20 feet away, facing challenges that could have been prevented if he'd been there. The successful businessman who'd negotiated million-dollar deals without blinking found himself crying in a hospital administrator's office, mourning not just Linda's death, but 25 years of missed birthdays, missed bedtime stories, missed chances to be the father she'd believed he could be. When he finally looked up, Dr. Chen was watching him with gentle understanding. "They're mine," he whispered. "Those children, they're my children." Dr. Chen nodded slowly. "I can see it now, in their eyes. Emma, especially. She has your way of looking at the world like she's figuring out how to fix it." Marcus stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the parking lot, where his Mercedes sat like a symbol of everything he'd chosen over love. "She tried to tell me," he said, his voice hollow. 25 years ago, she tried to reach me, and I was too busy building my empire to take her calls." "You didn't know," Dr. Chen said gently. "But I should have. I should have been there for her, for them. Emma's been fighting cancer while I've been buying art I never look at. Linda worked herself to death while I complained about which restaurant to buy for my portfolio." The weight of his choices crashed over him. Every luxury he'd purchased, every relationship he'd sabotaged, every moment he'd chosen success over connection, it all led to this moment, to finding out he'd had a family who needed him while he convinced himself he needed no one. Through the office window, he could see the twins in the recreation room. Emma was tired now, leaning against her brother as he continued reading. Even from a distance, Marcus could see the family resemblance, the set of Ethan's shoulders when he concentrated, the way Emma tilted her head when she was thinking. They were part of him, and he'd never known they existed. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. A nurse entered with an apologetic smile. "Dr. Chen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Emma's feeling dizzy. Her grandmother is on her way to pick them up." Marcus felt panic rise in his chest. They were leaving, and he hadn't decided what to do with the information that was reshaping his entire understanding of his life. "How long do I have?" he asked Dr. Chen. "Their grandmother lives about an hour away. She'll be here within the next 30 minutes. 30 minutes to decide how to handle the most important moment of his life. 30 minutes to figure out how. To tell 2 children that the man they'd just met was the father they'd never known they had. Marcus looked once more at Linda's letter, at her careful words about choice and love and second chances. She'd given him the greatest gift imaginable, Not just the knowledge that he had children, but the opportunity to choose what kind of father he wanted to be. In the recreation room, Emma was fighting to stay awake, and Ethan was singing softly. To her, some lullaby he'd probably learned from Linda. They were taking care of each other the way they'd learned to do, with the quiet strength of children who'd faced too much too young. Marcus folded the letter carefully and put it in his jacket pocket right over his heart. Then he walked back toward the recreation room, toward the children who were waiting for their grandmother, unaware that their entire world was about to change. As he stood in the doorway watching them, Marcus realized that for the first time, in 25 years, he knew exactly what he wanted to do with his life. The recreation room felt smaller when Marcus entered it the second time. Emma had fallen asleep against her brother's shoulder, and Ethan was carefully turning the pages of their book, trying not to wake her. The other children had been taken back to their rooms or picked up by family members, leaving the twins alone with their quiet vigil. Marcus approached slowly, not wanting to startle them. Ethan looked up as he drew near, his blue eyes, so much like Marcus's own, filled with the kind of wariness that comes from disappointment. "Is your sister okay?" Marcus asked, settling into the child-sized chair across from them. "She gets tired after her treatments," Ethan said matter-of-factly. "Mama always said that meant the medicine was working hard to make her better." The casual mention of Linda hit Marcus like a physical blow. These children spoke of their mother with such love, such trust, even in loss. She'd raised them to believe in hope even when facing the impossible. "Tell me about your mama," Marcus said gently. Ethan's face lit up despite his sadness. "She was the best mama in the world. She worked a lot, but she always came home and asked about our day. And she made the best pancakes, even when we only had the mix from the food bank." Emma stirred slightly, and Ethan automatically adjusted his position to make her more comfortable, a gesture so natural it spoke of years of practice. "She read to us every night," Ethan continued, "even when she was really tired. She said stories were like medicine for the heart." Marcus felt his throat tighten. What was her favorite story to tell? She liked to tell us about this prince who was really lost, and he didn't know he was supposed to be taking care of a kingdom. She said someday the prince would figure out what was really important and he'd come back and everything would be okay. The fairy tale wasn't lost on Marcus. Linda had been telling their children about him, preparing them for a possibility she'd never been sure would happen. Did she ever talk about your father?" Marcus asked carefully. Ethan's expression grew thoughtful. "Sometimes. She said he was a good man who was just scared of being a daddy. She said maybe someday he wouldn't be scared anymore." Before Marcus could respond, Emma's eyes fluttered open. She looked around confused for a moment before focusing on him. "You're still here," she said, her voice hoarse. "I am. I was hoping we could talk a little more." Emma sat up straighter, though the effort clearly cost her. "Are you going to help fix the hospital?" "I am. But Emma, I need to tell you something important about your mama's letter." Both children looked at him with the intense attention they'd shown earlier. Marcus realized there was no easy way to say what needed to be said. "Your mama and I knew each other a long time ago, before you were born." "Were you friends?" Ethan asked. We were. We loved each other very much. But I made a mistake. I was scared of having a family, of being responsible for people I cared about. So I left." Emma frowned. "That was dumb." Despite everything, Marcus smiled. "Yes, it was very dumb." "Did you know about us?" Ethan asked with the directness children possess. Marcus took a deep breath. "No. Your mama tried to tell me, but I had moved away and changed my phone number. I didn't know you existed until today." The twins exchanged a look that spoke of a conversation held without words. the kind of communication that develops between siblings who've relied on each other through difficulty. "Are you our daddy?" Emma asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a prayer. Marcus looked at these two brave children, his children, and felt 25 years of emotional walls crumble. "Yes," he said simply, "I'm your daddy." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. Instead, she studied his face with the same intensity she'd shown when they first met. "Mama said our daddy was important and busy. Are you too busy to be our daddy now?" The question pierced him. Here was his daughter, battling cancer, asking if he had time for her in his life. The successful businessman who'd thought nothing could shake him was undone by an 8-year-old's need for reassurance. "Emma, Ethan," he said, his voice shaking, "I want you to listen to me very carefully. I have never wanted anything more in my entire life than to be your daddy. I'm not too busy, I'm not too important, and I'm not too scared anymore." Ethan looked skeptical. "But what about Grandma? She's supposed to take care of us now." Marcus had been so focused on the emotional revelation that he'd almost forgotten the practical reality. These children had a legal guardian, a grandmother who was probably struggling to care for them on a fixed income. "Tell me about your grandma," Marcus said. "She's Mama's mama," Emma said. "She's really old and her hands hurt a lot. She cries when she thinks we're not looking." "She loves us," Ethan added loyally, "but her apartment is really small. Emma has to sleep on the couch because there's only one bedroom." Marcus felt anger rise in him, not at the grandmother who was doing her best, but at a system that left elderly women trying to raise sick children in poverty while he lived in a penthouse with empty bedrooms. Would you want to live with me?" he asked carefully. The twins looked at each other again, having another silent conversation. "Would we still get to see Grandma?" Emma asked. "Of course. We'd make sure she was taken care of too." "And would you learn how to make pancakes?" Ethan asked seriously. Marcus laughed despite his tears. "I'll learn how to make the best pancakes in Chicago." "And would you read to us?" Emma asked. "Mama said daddies are supposed to read bedtime stories." "Every single night," Marcus promised. Emma nodded decisively. "Okay, but you have to promise not to leave again." "I promise I will never leave you again." At that moment, Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway with an elderly woman who could only be their grandmother. Dorothy Parker was in her 70s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, and clothes that spoke of careful maintenance rather than frequent replacement. Her face showed the strain of recent loss, but her eyes were kind. "Grandma," the twins called out, running to embrace her. Marcus stood slowly, recognizing that this moment would determine everything. Dorothy Parker looked at him with curiosity, then recognition dawned in her eyes. "You're Marcus Wellington," she said. "I've seen you in the newspapers. Mrs. Parker, I need to speak with you. About Linda and about Emma and Ethan." Dorothy's expression grew guarded. "What about them?" Marcus glanced at the children, who were watching the adult conversation with the intense focus of kids whose lives had been shaped by adult decisions. "Perhaps we could speak privately," Dr. Chen intervened. "Why don't I take the children to get some juice while you talk?" Once they were alone, Marcus showed Dorothy the letter. He watched her face change as she read Linda's words, and saw the moment she understood what this meant. "She never told me," Dorothy whispered. "All these years I thought their father was just some man who ran off." "I never knew," Marcus said. "If I had..." Linda was proud, Dorothy said, sinking into one of the small chairs, too proud to ask for help, even when things got really bad. "But she loved you, even after all these years. She kept that letter, kept hoping." Marcus sat across from her. "Mrs. Parker, I want to take care of them, all of you. I want to be the father I should have been from the beginning. Dorothy studied him with sharp eyes. They're not puppies you can just take home because you feel guilty. They're children who've been through hell. Emma's got months of treatment ahead of her, and Ethan, he's been taking care of his sister and his dying mother. They need stability, not some rich man's guilt project. Her words stung because they held the truth. Marcus realized he was being judged not by his wealth or success, but by whether he could be trusted with the hearts of two children who'd already lost too much. "You're right," he said quietly. "I can't undo 25 years of absence with money or good intentions, but I can promise you this: I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to learn how to be their father, even if it takes the rest of my life. And I'm going to make sure you're part of that life too, because you're their family, and that makes you my family." Dorothy was quiet for a long moment. "What about your life? Your business? I assume there's been other women?" Marcus thought. About his empty penthouse, his failed marriages, his carefully constructed isolation. "There's nothing in my life more important than this. Nothing." And when the novelty wears off, when Emma's having a bad day from chemo and Ethan's having nightmares and they're both crying for their mama, "Then I'll hold them while they cry," Marcus said simply, "because that's what fathers do." Dorothy searched his face, looking for the insincerity she expected to find. Instead, she saw something that reminded her of Linda at 18, full of fierce determination and love. When Dr. Chen returned with the twins, they immediately sensed the tension in the room. "Are we in trouble?" Emma asked. Dorothy smiled at her granddaughter. "No, sweetheart, but we need to talk about some big changes." What followed was the most important conversation of Marcus's life. He sat on the floor with his children, and explained as simply as he could that he was their father, that he wanted to take care of them, but that it was their choice too. "Would we have our own rooms?" Ethan asked practically. "Yes, and your own bathroom, and a big kitchen where we can make those pancakes." "What about my treatments?" Emma asked. "The best doctors, the best hospital." "Whatever you need." Emma considered this. "Would you come with me? Mama always came with me, even when she had to miss work. I'll be there for every appointment, every treatment, every time you need me." "What if you change your mind?" she asked, voicing the fear that children of abandonment carry. Marcus took her small hands in his. "Emma, look at me. I spent 25 years being successful at everything except the things that really mattered. I'm not going to waste another day. You and Ethan are the most important things in my life now." "More important than your company?" Ethan asked. "More important than anything?" The twins looked at their grandmother, seeking her approval for this life-changing decision. "What do you think, Grandma?" Emma asked. Dorothy looked at Marcus one more time, then at her grandchildren. "I think your mama would be very happy, and I think this man is ready to learn how to be your daddy." 3 months later, Marcus stood in the kitchen of his newly remodeled home, attempting to flip pancakes, while Emma and Ethan offered contradictory advice from their perches on bar stools. The penthouse had been sold. They now lived in a house in Lincoln Park with a yard and bedrooms decorated with the children's artwork. Emma's cancer was responding well to treatment at the best children's hospital in Chicago, one that had received a substantial donation from the Wellington Foundation. Dorothy lived in the converted mother-in-law suite, her arthritis treated by top specialists, her days filled with purpose as she helped raise the grandchildren she'd feared losing. The business still thrived, but Marcus had learned to delegate, to prioritize, to leave the office for school plays and doctor appointments and bedtime stories. His employees were amazed by the transformation in their workaholic boss, though none more than Marcus himself. "Daddy, you're burning it," Emma pointed out, bringing him back to the present. "That's not burned, that's extra crispy," Marcus said, sliding the slightly charred pancake onto her plate. "Mama never burned them," Ethan said, with the brutal honesty of childhood. "Well, Mama had years of practice. I'm still learning." As they ate breakfast together, Marcus looked around the table. At his family, really looked at them. Emma, stronger now but still fighting, always quick with a joke to lighten heavy moments. Ethan, protective and gentle, already showing signs of the man he'd become. Dorothy, telling stories of Linda's childhood that kept her daughter's memory. Alive in the house, the letter that had changed everything was framed now, hanging in his office as a reminder of what truly mattered. Linda's words about second chances and learning to let the world change you had become the guiding principle of his new life. After breakfast, as he braided Emma's hair for school, a skill he'd learned from YouTube videos and Dorothy's patient instruction, she looked at him in the mirror. "Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart. Do you think Mama knows about us being together now?" Marcus met her eyes in the reflection. This brave little girl who'd taught him more about courage than any business challenge ever had. "I think she does, and I think she's very proud of the strong, smart, beautiful daughter she raised. And proud of you too," Emma said matter-of-factly, "for not being scared anymore." That evening, after homework was done and stories were read, and good nights were said, Marcus sat in Linda's old rocking chair, one of the few things Dorothy had saved from their old apartment. The chair had been moved to Emma's room, where Marcus spent at least a few minutes every night, sometimes reading, sometimes just watching his daughter sleep. Tonight, he held Linda's letter, reading it again as he had so many times over the past months. Her words about success meaning nothing without someone to share it with had proven true in ways he was still discovering. He'd gained a family, but more than that, he'd learned who he was meant to be. The scared young man who'd run from love had finally grown into the father Linda had always believed he could become. Outside Emma's window, snow was beginning to fall on Chicago, covering the city in fresh possibility. Marcus folded the letter carefully and placed it in his pocket, over his heart, where it belonged. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more treatments for Emma, a school play for Ethan, dinner with Dorothy's bridge club friends who'd adopted him as an honorary grandson. The ordinary, extraordinary moments that make up a life lived in love rather than in the pursuit of success. As he stood to leave Emma's room, she stirred in her sleep. "Love you, Daddy," she whispered without waking. "Love you too, sweetheart," he whispered back. "Forever and always." Marcus Wellington, who'd once thought he had everything, had finally learned the difference between having it all and having what mattered. And in a letter written by a woman who'd never stopped believing, in him, he'd found his way home. The end. Thank you so much for watching this powerful story here on M&A The Story Unfolds. If this video touched your heart, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our upcoming tales, each one crafted to move, inspire, and surprise you. And don't forget to click the notification bell so you're the first to know when a new story is released.